Let's look at the regulatory environment at this moment in the UK. Do you think the UK should follow the US's very tough approach when it comes to regulation? Or do you think that the UK has a window of opportunity here to be more lenient and then attract inward talent?
So I never like the use of words like lenient in talking about a regulatory environment. The regulatory environment needs to be safe, secure, and effective. In my own view, the US has gone too far in effectively making it impossible for certain actors to participate in digital asset marketplaces. And I don't think that's necessary, given the size and sophistication of the actors that we're talking about. And I think the UK does have an opportunity to create a well-regulated, properly ordered and disciplined marketplace, which is nonetheless more accommodating to those big institutional players than the US looks as though it's going to be. The US has got a bit of an institutional challenge here in that there are competitive regulators within the US. And whenever a new product, a new marketplace comes along, there's always a sense, I think, that different regulators are trying to position themselves around that. We have just the one regulator here in the UK for financial services. It seems to me there is an opportunity for the UK, as it has done successfully in the past, to identify a mistake, an excess of regulation in the United States, and to create an attractive environment in the UK for US businesses to operate offshore. Of course, in a well-regulated environment, but not in an environment where the regulatory parameters are set to cripple activity. Everybody understands how banking works, how financial institutions work, and regulators will understand very well that when they impose 100% reserve requirements on institutions, they're effectively telling them they can't participate in a market. That is not something that I think we should emulate in the UK.
Do you think at this moment in time, the UK is very far from achieving this ambition to become a global crypto hub? And what is the major obstacle that would need to be overcome to achieve this ambition?
I think we are still quite some way away at the moment, to be honest. And I see other jurisdictions around the world making significant strides towards the broader digitized financial markets that are the big prize here. I hope it's not too late, and I hope that the UK will move into the vanguard of this action. But at the moment, it is smaller jurisdictions that are making the running. The UK has huge potential advantages here, and it does not need to be as accommodating as some of the smaller jurisdictions are suggesting that they will be. The UK is a Tier 1 financial services jurisdiction. What it needs to prosper is to be the most accessible Tier 1 jurisdiction, and it needs to be practically accessible for firms that are obviously qualified to do this kind of business. And that means certainly the big institutions who want to participate in digitized financial services markets have to be able to access the market here. As ever with designing a regulatory regime for a new product, it's a very careful balancing act. If you err on the side of being too accommodating, you risk disasters happening and your reputation being trashed. If you err on the side of being too restrictive, then the business goes elsewhere. If you look back over the last 40 or 50 years, the UK has got a pretty good track record in financial services regulation of getting this about right, being not the most accommodating jurisdiction, but being accommodating enough to attract the business away from more conservative jurisdictions. And I hope we're about to pull this trick off again.
There is a big vote coming up in Brussels in, I think it's the 14th of April, with the MiCA regulation, the Markets in Crypto Assets regulation. Now, you did mention there that business could go elsewhere. Is there a risk that if Brussels gets this right, they'll be ahead of the game and they could steal a lot of the innovation talent that would have went to the UK, might possibly, instead of London, go to Frankfurt instead?
Maybe not Frankfurt, but certainly other jurisdictions within the Eurozone. Yeah, I think there is a risk. I think there is a real risk. I think, candidly, this is probably the first time in 40 years that there's ever been an issue on which the Eurozone countries looked as though they were going to be ahead of the UK in terms of financial services innovation. During the period that we were members of the European Union, typically the UK drove the financial services agenda and was always a first mover. So it's a very uncomfortable proposition to think that with the MiCA vote coming up later on this year or early next, perhaps we could see the European Union offering a trading environment which is more permissive and looks more attractive to institutions and to innovators than the UK does. But I'm hopeful that the very fact of the European Union moving forward will jolt regulators and legislators here awake and just underscore that this is not some marginal activity being experimented with by a few third-tier jurisdictions. It is mainstream now, and when you've got institutions as conservative in this respect as the European Union looking to exploit it, then we have to recognize that there is a real opportunity here. We ignore it at our peril, because if we are right, those of us who believe that digitization is the future of financial markets, this isn't a parallel world. There isn't over here a crypto market that may prosper in Amsterdam or Paris or Brussels or Madrid, and somewhere else a traditional financial services market that we can carry on exploiting. If we're right, the whole market becomes digital quite quickly once the digital revolution starts. And that leaves us as a traditional dominant player in European financial services seriously at risk. So when we see a new technology which is a threat to the established market technology, we need to embrace it, make it safe, and deploy it. That's what we need to be doing. And we have more to lose than almost anybody else if someone other than the UK is able to steal a march here and get ahead of the game. Where we want to go, and where I think most responsible actors want to go, is normalizing this sector so that the providers of infrastructure and trading platforms become boring providers of infrastructure and trading platforms, not flamboyant offshore-based visionaries. And I think the sooner we can do that, the better. Because as you've already observed earlier on, if we're right, and this is the beginning of a digitization process across the whole of financial services, the infrastructure that underlies it, the blockchains that are used, the platforms and the technologies that are used to manage them, will become part of the systemically important rails of the financial services industry. And as such, they have to be properly regulated, properly managed, and there have to be multiple providers of. You can't have the industry running on one monopoly supplier of any service or any technology. So we would expect there to be multiple providers of solutions across the digitized financial services sector.